Welcome back, gentlemen. Another episode of the Doug Las Vegas Bets MMA betting show. As you can see, I'm donning the Irish flag. We all know why. Huge week. The Mac is back. The notorious one, Conor McGregor, is back in our headliner this week after the week off. He's taken on former BMF champ, former featherweight champ, Max Blessed Holloway in a fantastic main event on one of my... I feel like I've said this about the last 3 pay-per-views, but these main cards are fantastic. I feel like there's different reasons for all of them. A lot of the ones on the White House card had some pretty sizable favorites, even if there was a shocker at the end. In this main card, I'll say right off the bat, nobody winning would shock me. I could go 0 for 5, I could go 5-0, and I'd wake up Sunday morning no more surprised one way or the other. Well, maybe I'd be a little more surprised if I went 0-5 because I get to pick who I think is going to win. So maybe that would be a little surprising and probably more than anything disappointing. But let's hope that doesn't happen. Without further ado, like I said, we got a lot of competitive fights on this deep card. Let's get into things. All right, time to give my completely unbiased breakdown. Okay, no, but I think that it'll become pretty clear that I don't have much bias with my opinion on this one soon. That being said, let me just introduce the fight before I start jumping into stuff. Holy, it's Conor McGregor versus Max Holloway. This is the main event. It's the rematch from 10, 12 years ago. It was definitely over 10 at this point. Conor McGregor was double champ 10 years ago. It was from when they were kids at 145. Conor McGregor actually wrestled his way to victory. It's well documented. He tore his ACL in that fight and switched things up. His only decision win on the run at 145. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time talking about that. I don't expect it to be much of a similar fight. It's not only a weight class above, it's actually 2 weight classes above. And like I said, over a decade later with plenty of variables that I think we can evaluate that matter more than it being a rematch. I think we should start with the returning Conor McGregor, one of the all-time greats in the sport. I think a lot of people try and diminish his accomplishments because his run to the top was so short, but he really, the first simultaneous double champ, the single greatest moment in MMA history, undeniable. I mean, maybe the other guy, Max Holloway, has an argument with the last second knockout against Gaethje, but I think it's pretty hard to argue that the pinnacle of MMA was Conor McGregor knocking Jose Aldo out with the first punch back when he first claimed gold. I mean, Conor McGregor is the biggest star the sport's ever seen, and that was the moment that really made it happen. It made him capture gold. It made everything he said come true. It really, when you talk as big as he talks, you have to come through in a big way. And he came through bigger than I think even his biggest supporters could have imagined at the time. Obviously, his star only rose after that with, I mean, it was really just a perfect storm when you look back at Conor McGregor's run. It's like a movie how everything plays out. Rafael dos Anjos pulls out. They put in the perfect opponent, Nate Diaz, to skyrocket him to the next level, not just by beating him, but by doing that rematch and making it the fight and the rivalry that it was. I mean, it was, again, the perfect storm. And of course, while that rivalry was going on, made it so Conor didn't have to fight RDA, which I think at the very least you have to acknowledge it goes differently than his fight with Eddie Alvarez went, which again only added to his star power, broke the record for knockdowns in a title fight in his first fight at 155 in the UFC, because the Nate Diaz ones were up at 170. So, I mean, when all that happens, it was just no wonder he became the global superstar that's been untouched in the sport of MMA in terms of star power ever since, and then obviously goes off to box Floyd, and that's kind of where the downtrend starts, the end of the old Conor McGregor, and in with this second phase where you're seeing a different person throughout his time since this Floyd boxing match. The Floyd boxing match didn't necessarily go terribly. I mean, you're boxing one of the greatest to ever do it in, I believe it was his professional debut. He might have had some amateur experience. Yeah, it was his pro debut. I mean, it was never gonna go well in hindsight. So, then obviously had the layoff, the legal issues, the Dolly incident that led into the Khabib fight, losing the Khabib fight, going on another long layoff, a brief comeback with the Cowboy fight, promises the comeback season, then COVID kind of derails everything. They can't set up an event. Sets up the Dustin rematch where he gets upset after a pretty good first round. Just Dustin kept working that calf and knocked him out in the second round. And then obviously in the trilogy with Dustin Poirier, broke his leg now so many years ago. It's bizarre thinking how long ago that was, back in 2021, 5 years ago. I mean, so much has changed in the sport, but it still feels like Conor's always been relevant somehow. Um, but yeah, I mean, when you're talking about him as a fighter, one of the most unique strikers, the most dynamic movement the game has ever seen during his run at 145, exceptional timing, exceptional power, and just a star power and ability to draw people in that, again, the sport had never and probably never will see again. We don't get guys that draw global attention like that in MMA, even combat sports anymore. I mean, Conor's put his head on the Mount Rushmore of superstars there. He really, the world stopped when Conor McGregor fought, and to this day, I think the world will continue to stop when Conor McGregor steps in the octagon. That being said, an incredibly tough challenge across from him as Max Holloway makes his 170-pound debut here. Max Holloway has been around. If I went through the whole Max Holloway run, we'd be here all day, because not only did he have a great run to the title like Conor after losing to Conor, went on that great run at 145, but even since then had the Volkanovski rivalry, moves up to 155, wins the BMF title, defends it in the retirement trilogy fight with Dustin Poirier, loses it in the Charles rematch earlier this year. And I'm going to just touch on those last few, really. So the Charles rematch, I think, kind of showed that, yeah, Max can fight at 55, but when he's fighting a big 55er, he's just not going to have the physicality. Charles really bullied him in that clinch, just got to the positions he wanted to with ease. And there was very limited striking, but in the striking, it was very clear to me that Charles Oliveira was ahead. He was landing the harder shots. He even looked like he buzzed Max Holloway a little bit. Like I said, that was very limited striking, and you could tell Max was desperate for a lot of that too. He just knew he needed the knockout because he was going to be down on the scorecards. So it's a little hard to evaluate that, but I did think that was a tough look. And then the Poirier fight, I mean, he got hurt pretty bad in that one. Looked good early. It's hard for me to evaluate. I mean, when we're talking about a guy's retirement fight in Poirier who'd been through so much, and he still got dropped, almost finished. There were, Poirier had moments in that fight. I think it wasn't necessarily a great sign for Max Holloway. It showed that, yeah, he has pretty good power in his hands at 155. That's the one thing I'll say, is I think obviously he's better suited at 145. That's where the long win streak, the title reign happened, all that. But at 155, he hits hard, and when you give him the right kind of matchup with a striker, the size isn't really going to show. With Gaethje, he was able to use his movement and his speed rather than relying on that physicality when, Gaethje's clearly a more natural 55er. So getting into how this matchup actually goes, a lot of money has come in on Conor McGregor. It's, part of me thinks the obvious answer is just, the casual money coming in because Conor McGregor was a big underdog. Why wouldn't, if you're trying to have fun, throw $5 on that? Everybody out there does that. You know how many people have sports betting accounts and they don't think about their picks. They don't think about what they do with their money. So they just threw down on Conor McGregor early. Part of me thinks it's that. Another part of me looks at this matchup and thinks there is definitely reason to believe that Conor McGregor can get it done here. Now, I'm definitely not advocating for a play on his money line because I think his path to victory is pretty limited to the early round KOs. His cardio didn't look ready to go 5 rounds the last times we saw him. He's only gone the 5 rounds once, and with a guy like Nate Diaz who just with not as dangerous. I hesitate to say that because he did finish Conor the first time, but Nate's not going to be beating you up, putting the damage constantly. Like Max Holloway has a different level of volume. So I think I have a really hard time seeing Conor have success in the later rounds past round 3. I think his path to victory is limited to a knockout within the first 2 rounds, probably just within the first round. So if you're betting him, I'd bet him there. And I say that's his path. I think it's definitely possible because, like I said, we saw Charles tagged a little bit by Charles when they were standing, looked like he was buzzed. Dustin dropped him. I imagine if Conor has anything left in his hands, it's power. And he is going to be the more natural 170 pounder. He's been at this 170-pound frame for probably a long time now since he went on that bulk after his leg broke. I expect him to be the much bigger, harder hitting guy, which again is going to in turn hurt his gas tank. So I do think it's possible he catches Max early, drops him, has some moments, or even finishes him. But I'm certainly not picking Conor here off of this layoff, especially with the money coming in that dropped the price tag down. I think, like I said, there was more reason before. Now that price tag has come under plus 200, I'm completely out. I'm not really interested in the early round knockout props here. So I'm going to pick Max Holloway. I'm going to pick him to get a 3rd round TKO. I think 2nd, 3rd, 4th. It really just depends on how he plays the fight. I think if he stays safe, avoids the big shots through the first round, then that threat of Conor goes down and he can start putting the pace on him. And like I said, I have a pretty hard time seeing Conor McGregor go 5 rounds at this point. So I do think it's going to be a Max Holloway finish here. I'm not sure if I'm going to bet it. I think, I still see the path for Conor, and there is, come on, there's part of me that's obviously a little biased, so I'm going to be rooting hard for him. But I find it hard to advocate for betting on him when the value's already been squeezed out of this line. So if you got in early, I think, you're fine. You got a good price on a guy who's live to win, but outside of that, I don't think betting Conor McGregor is reasonable. Maybe Max Holloway as a parlay piece, but I'm not overly confident in either side. I'm just going to be sitting back and watching this one as a fan. Go to lightweight here, actually at 155 rather than a lightweight bout of 170. Benoît Denis taking on Paddy Pimblett. This is a fun one of the European lightweights, the European lightweight finishers as well. 2 always exciting guys. I'll start with Benoît Denis. He is about as reckless as it gets. The guy just walks forward. He's very limited in his techniques, and I don't say that insultingly. I say he's a guy who got into MMA late, and he's clearly worked on, like, okay, I want this tool, and this tool to implement my game. And then he goes and implements his very aggressive wrestling style of just pressure, take damage, body kicks, obviously always opens with that body kick, which Moicano picked up on. There are some obvious flaws in his defense. Does not move his head. Eats shots. He's just too aggressive at times. I do think since moving gyms, or I shouldn't really say moving gyms, I should say getting a head coach in Nicholas Ott, he's definitely improved with how reckless he is, at least on the ground. Not necessarily On the feet, he's still a little wild, although I guess it's been a bit more under control, you could say. But we used to see him losing dominant grappling positions all the time just because he was way over aggressive. Even against the lower level guys, he was just always getting too high on the back takes or getting squeaked out of mount. And I think in this last 4 fight run since the Moicano loss, when he started working with Nicholas Ott, he's done a lot better with that. I mean, you look at the Dan Hooker fight, once he got on top, he was on top doing damage until he finished. When he got on top of Rufi, it was too difficult for Rufi to get up. He got the tap. I mean, the Dariush fight didn't go very far. Even Kyle Prepolek, it was just, you know, you can say Prepolek's low level, yeah, but he was not doing those things against lower level guys. You can still show improvement in your game against lower level guys. So I was impressed with that. I think obviously he does good damage on top once he secures those positions. Saw the Dan Hooker fight made made Dan fight for his life in there with Herb Dean not doing him any favors, stopping the fight. Went on a long time of him taking punches there. And obviously pretty good submission game too. Nice arm triangle that he got Prepolek with. Tried it on Dan Hooker, and he got that rear naked choke face crank. Kind of a more of a face crank on Mauricio Rufy. Paddy Pimblett on the other side, he's fan favorite coming off that title shot loss. Kind of had the gifted route to the title with a questionable decision against Jared Gordon, and then 3 fights against aging veterans. Nice to put it nicely. And Tony Ferguson, who was on I think it was 7 or 8 fight losing streak in the UFC. That was one of the later ones in that. King Green, King Green's actually a pretty good win. King Green's probably his best win. And then Michael Chandler, who, we've seen since then just once at the White House, and he looked abysmal. So that was rough. And then he fought Justin Gaethje, who many thought was over the hill. Nope, definitely not over the hill. He beat the dog shit out of him for 5 rounds. It was pretty entertaining. Pimblett did have some moments. It was just a wild brawl. Pimblett definitely showed he is durable as hell. The whole Scousers don't get knocked out thing he does. Yeah, he's got pretty good reason to believe in that chin because he ate some big shots. Evaluating his actual skill set, the guy's a pretty decent finisher. You know, he's found the knockouts. He's got good power and good instinct for when to really pour on the volume when he's got someone hurt. Obviously, pretty good submissions with the nice triangle after guillotine switch against King Green early. Although I've got some issues with his game. He struggles pretty badly when he's pressured on the feet. Doesn't like operating off the back foot. Even late against Tony Ferguson, he was getting walked down pretty badly. And he's not a good wrestler at all. It's plagued him for a while. I mean, you look the Jordan Levant fight, he was getting controlled until he reversed and got sub. Rodrigo Vargas, I think the guy who was the short notice Mexican guy, was controlling him again until Paddy hit the reverse and immediately got the sub. And you know, it's all well, you keep getting these finishes and reversing these guys, but you're just not going to get that every time. Eventually, you're going to run into a guy who you don't reverse, and it just stays on top of you and gets damage off. That's kind of where my pick goes in this fight. I mean, I think it's going to end up being a grappling match. Benoît Saint-Denis just naturally shoots, and I don't think Pimblett is going to defensively wrestle and force a striking match. I think they're going to engage in the scrambles, and I just think Benoît Saint-Denis is the one who is better at getting on top. He's the better wrestler. He's going to get those dominant positions and get the damage off. So that's what it comes down to. I think if they do strike, I also favor Benoît Saint-Denis. He's limited, but he's going to be walking forward, putting the pressure on Paddy Pimblett. And like I said, Pimblett doesn't like moving backwards and striking. Neither of them, I'm not going to say he has a clear striking advantage. Neither of them moves their head, really. They both swing wild and get into a brawl. Paddy has, like I said, the great chin. So there's that. But yeah, I am picking Benoît Saint-Denis here just because I think the pressure that he puts on is not good for Pimblett, and I think he's the much better wrestler. So give me Benoît Saint-Denis to get this one on the ground, get the ground and pound going, get a second round TKO here. Another long time ago rematch from Well, I say this one's a rematch from the Reebok era. Conor and Max was from even before that. But yeah, we got a bantamweight rematch here between top-ranked Cory Sandhagen coming off his title fight loss to former champ Merab Dvalishvili, and Mario Bautista coming off a main event win earlier this year against Vinicius Oliveira. I'll start with Sandhagen. He is a tall, long, tricky bantamweight. He's got this weird technical kickboxing style, nice elbows in tight, solid long boxing, good low kicks. We've seen him fight for the title a couple times. Fought for the interim title against Petr Yan back in the day. Got off to a good start, but eventually Petr Yan got in his groove, started doing the damage, and after his win against Steveson Figueiredo last year, got the shot against Merab Dvalishvili. Again, got off to a pretty good start winning round one, but got hurt bad in round two. And of course, when you start falling behind against Merab, it generally snowballs because of his cardio and pace. That's kind of what happened. Just got dragged for the rest of the fight, or was controlled. It wasn't really complete domination, but you know what I mean. Merab clearly won the rest of the fight. Anyways, he's been off since then. That was back in October. So it's been a while since we've seen Cory. He was asking for the O'Malley matchup, and I kind of question where he's at. He's 34 now, coming off that second title shot. I'm sure it feels like. I'm sure he felt like it was a title shot the first time. You've already lost to top guys Merab, Umar, and Yan. I imagine the motivation for Sandhagen is pretty tough. I mean, and he missed out on the big fight with O'Malley. I have to believe this is going to be a downward trend for Sandhagen. I have a hard time picking people in his spot quite often. That being said, he's a really tricky fighter. I mean, he's super well rounded. We've seen him use his grappling to get his last 3 wins, and I don't think people necessarily think of him as a grappler. Like, he out grappled Figgy to injure his knee, dominated Font on the ground, and dominated Marlon Vera on the ground. Um, so, seeing him use his wrestling success and not necessarily be a striker. I mean, even if you look back going to the Song Yadong fight, he was losing that fight striking wise and kind of used the clinch and obviously won via doctor stoppage. But Song's boxing looked pretty good in that fight. And on to the other side, Mario Bautista is a very well-rounded mixed martial artist. Was on a long win streak before his loss to Umar. He just got back in the win column against Vinicius Oliveira. Like I said, this guy, I said it to someone earlier today. He's got a workman-like attitude. This guy just shows up, consistently gets better. I love his interviews. He's always just so like matter of fact. He always sets these goals and he really goes for it, even if he can't get it. Like he said, he was going to finish Umar in the first round. You could tell he went in the octagon believing he was going to finish Umar in the first round. So I like that he's confident. I like that he's smart. I think his fight IQ is pretty obvious and he doesn't worry about the fans, which I mean, as a fan, you want to see an exciting fight. As someone who's picking fights or someone who's betting fights, you want to see a guy who's going to take the clear path to victory. And Mario Bautista doesn't let you down in that aspect. He saw that cage pushing was the path to victory against Jose Aldo. He cage pushed. And then in his next fight against Patchy Mix, when he's fighting a grappler, said, all right, I'll just box the whole time, and boxed him up for 3 rounds. Obviously struggled with Umar Nurmagomedov. Umar's wrestling is going to be so tricky for anybody. But once he figured out Vinicius Oliveira, he dominated him before getting the submission. He looked fantastic in that fight. I have no doubt about where he's at, motivation-wise, with a great team at the MMA lab. I think with my breakdown of both fighters, you can tell which way I'm leaning, but I do want to make it clear that I think this is an incredibly close fight, and the majority of the reason that I am going to go with Bautista is because he's the underdog. I mean, you can definitely list reasons to pick Sandhagen. He's the taller, longer guy who's fought the better competition. You could say probably the better overall technical kickboxer with a really good ground game. I mean, we've seen him get out grappled by Merab and Umar, but that's Merab and Umar, and he was able to have success early against them. And this is just a 3-round fight. That being said, Bautista can mix in the wrestling, and Bautista's a pretty damn good boxer. I think if they're just boxing or striking, if Bautista can stay in his face and avoid the movement of Sandhagen, or kind of corner him away from circling out and getting his kicks off, I think Bautista can win the striking and actually control in the grappling in this here. So I'm leaning Bautista as a pure pick. I'm leaning towards betting him right here. Not really sure. At plus 120, I'd be happy to take the current line. Kind of waiting to see if it moves or wait if I have more conviction because I do. I mean, this is a tough fight to call for me technically, which is why I'm happy to just pick the underdog and call it a day. But yeah, this is a great matchup. Bautista, I think, has the striking to match him there, the grappling to match him there. I don't think he's going to get caught in a sub like he did the first time they fought. I think he's improved far too much on the mat. And he'll probably be the one initiating the takedowns here. I mean, I have trouble seeing Cory Sandhagen try to take Bautista down. Maybe he goes for some clinch work or, just a level change to keep him thinking, but I'd be pretty surprised if Sandhagen went with a grapple heavy approach, whereas I wouldn't be surprised if Bautista went with any approach. I think he can really mix it up in this one and show off that IQ and game planning. So give me Mario Bautista. Give me him by decision because Sandhagen is, of course, pretty durable and he's not necessarily a great finisher with most of his wins coming that way despite finishing the last one. So yeah, give me Mario Bautista by decision. Likely going to end up betting his money line there. This is a fantastic one at flyweight. Brandon Raw Dog Royval back against top prospect Lonnie Kavanagh coming off the biggest win of his career in a main event in Mexico City. We'll start with the always exciting Brandon Royval. He was in last year's fight of the year, in my opinion, against Josh Van. Unfortunately, was on the losing end of that, as well as his last fight where he was caught early by Manel Cape. First time he'd been finished by strikes in his career in that one. So right now the stock's pretty low on Brandon Royval, but just 33. He's not too old. I mean, not necessarily young for a flyweight, and he has taken a lot of damage. But I think this guy's still got a lot left in the tank. I mean, we're talking about 2-3 in his last 5. The losses come to Pantoja, the champion at the time, the dominant champion at the time, Josh Van, the current champion, and Manel Cape, who I believe is the next champion on the longest knockout streak in flyweight history. With wins in that time over Brandon Moreno and Tatsuro Taira. This guy is still top 5. This guy is still competing with the best in the world day in, day out. He has elite jiu-jitsu on the ground, although he doesn't necessarily go to the ground very often, and his wrestling isn't necessarily the best, but his pace is where he excels. This guy loves putting the pace on guys. He's got fantastic cardio and output, which really was on display in the Josh Van fight. I mean, you look at that performance and he lost, but it was really impressive when we know how good Van is on the feet. Took the second round off of him just by constantly keeping those straight punches in his face. Took a lot of his best shots early, and got caught at the very end exchanging. But overall, it was a great fight. And now since the Manel Cape loss, he's had about over 6 months to recover. I tend to think he'll be fine. He'll come out in fine form, keep putting the pace on early. Hopefully he can still take the damage that we have seen him take for a lot of his career early, because his style does somewhat rely on that, not necessarily the greatest head movement, not very defense oriented. Lonnie Kavanagh, now one of the cleanest kickboxers in the entire UFC. I mean, when you look at his skill, the first thing that comes to mind is speed. The guy's lightning fast. It's really fun to watch. Like I said before, he's coming off that great performance against Brandon Moreno, short notice 5-round main event at Elevation in Mexico City, where, he answered a lot of the questions. He got that fight against Charles Johnson in China, got knocked out after getting off to a great start, and then gets a step up in competition against a former champion in a main event after that. A lot of people were going, whoa, this doesn't really make sense. And then, I mean, he showed that skill shines through all. The Charles Johnson fight was more of a lesson than a loss. It's funny to say, but you can tell he took it that way. I don't necessarily think it was a cardio issue for him even there, because we saw him go the 5 rounds. We've seen him go 3 rounds for the first 2 fights of his UFC career. He went 3 rounds before that. I think it was more of an issue of pace, and that's definitely something you can learn. He just started feeling like he could do anything in there. He was too comfortable. Started trying to style on him, and then when the resistance came from a tough guy in Charles Johnson, who is gonna keep going for all 3 rounds, got taught that lesson. I don't necessarily think that's a continued issue is going to be his pacing. I do think it shows, though, that there's a concern if someone can put him into a high-paced brawl or get him to mix up the grappling. I thought Brandon Moreno might have some success if he tried grappling earlier in that one, but he didn't really start grappling until the fourth round. At that point, Lonnie was already too far ahead. So for this one, when I look at this fight, I think a lot of people are picking Lonnie because they see, it's probably mostly going to be a striking match. This guy is the clearly better technical striker coming off a great 5-round performance, so the cardio questions are answered. But I think the style of the striking actually makes this an incredibly close fight. And maybe even a Royval type of fight. I mean, if this is a clean kickboxing match where they're standing at range trying to, go technique for technique, yeah, I'm favoring Lonnie. But if Royval can get in his face and set that crazy pace, I'm not sure what Lonnie's going to look like come the partway through the second round and the third round. Lonnie probably still wins early. Van had some success early. I'm going to compare it to the Van matchup a lot, but that's different, and I'll get to why in a second. But come that second and third round, if Royval has taken those shots and he's still coming forward, still throwing 100 strikes around, how's Lonnie going to handle that? Is he going to start shooting and making a mistake? I mean, Royval, I don't know if he wants to take it to the ground with Royval. That could be a big mistake. He's definitely used wrestling to mitigate pressure before against Jose Ochoa and Felipe dos Santos. But in this particular match, it might not lend itself favorably. And one thing that I think leads to me thinking Van is a much worse matchup for Royval is we've seen Van loves high pace. Van can go high pace for 5 rounds, let alone 3. So he was very comfortable to match Royval and counter with him the whole time. Lonnie Kavanagh does not like pace. He likes clean, technical striking matches like Moreno gave him, where he can dictate the pace. He can throw when he wants to, as much as he wants to. He can circle and create space when he wants to. And I just don't think Royval is going to give him the time. So I bet Brandon Royval in this spot. I think I'm going to lock him in as the underdog best bet of the week. There's another guy who I'm interested in that too, but after betting him, the line moved the wrong way. If you follow my socials, you already know what I'm talking about, I'm sure. But I quite like Royval in this spot at these odds. I think this could be definitely a much closer to a 50-50 fight. I think it very much comes down to how Royval can come out of that early round. If he can come out of that early round having not taken a ton of damage, not getting his lead leg beat up and been dropped 2 times, and he set a good enough pace that Lonnie's had to kind of throw with him the whole time. I think he can start taking over in the later part of the second round, the third round, maybe even get a late finish. I don't know. I mean, we've seen Lonnie doesn't have a rock solid chin. Charles Johnson put him out, so I definitely think it's possible. Royval by KO plus 1,200. I took a little shot on that. I didn't track it. It's not very much at all, but I think that number it's worth a fun little shot. I definitely think he's live to get a late finish in this one. But my bet there is going to be the money line. I think he's going to be the underdog best bet of the week. So give me Brandon Royval in this great flyweight matchup. Cool fight here at lightweight opens the main card between I can never get that right, I swear. King Green. It is King Green, not Bobby. He legally changed his name. King Green takes on Terrance McKinney in this lightweight banger that opens up the main card. I'm going to kind of keep this one short because I think everybody knows what Terrance McKinney fights are at this point. It's a pretty quick rundown. Bobby Green, slick veteran. I mean, he's got that cool hands down style, boxes up tons of young prospects. Bit of a questionable chin. We saw him get slept bad by Mauricio Rufy, although I think most fighters, I should say, would go to sleep from that spinning wheel kick. Still, we'd seen him put out before, got submitted by Paddy Pimblett, but now he's on a nice 3-fight win streak with that decision over Lance Gibson. A very impressive performance over Daniel Zellhuber, where he styled on him and knocked him out. And most recently got the submission win over Jeremy Stephens, showing that Green is no slouch on the ground. We also saw him submit Tony Ferguson back in the day, too. That being said, he is now 39 years old, been around for a long time, taking a lot of damage. So there's definitely concerns there. On the other side, Terrance McKinney, the ultimate kill or be killed fighter, never sees the third round, rarely sees the second round, all gas from the start. Not the most durable himself. We've seen him finished early a couple times, got submitted in 2.5 minutes by Chris Duncan, got knocked out in under 40 seconds by Esteban Hibovics. That being said, if you have, a hole in your wrestling, he will just take you down and pound you out in a minute, or he'll take you down, grab the choke. If you have even the most slightest questionable durability and you get touched on the chin by him, the guy has some of the most freakish natural power I think you'll see in the sport. It's been clear since his debut when he came in and knocked out Matt Frohl in 7 seconds. The guy just has the death touch. He's so explosive. So my pick for this fight is it to end early. I'm just kidding. I find it hard to pick this. I've generally faded Terrance McKinney. That being said, I just have a hard time seeing him not land something on Bobby Green with the hands down. Early, he can make him think about the takedowns and the youth advantage. I mean, Terrance McKinney is not necessarily a kid. He's 31 still. But just the explosive athleticism of McKinney can never really be ignored. And the fact that I have any question at all about Green's durability makes me lean towards the McKinney side, just because he's going to, he's so fast, so explosive early. It's going to be really hard for Green to avoid everything with those hands down. I mean, he did it against Daniel Zellhuber. Zellhuber, I don't think, is quite as fast or explosive as Terrance McKinney, so that's a little bit different a matchup. That being said, I'm not necessarily eager to run and put my money down on this one. Obviously, I'm not recommending a Terrance McKinney money line bet. If I'm recommending a Terrance McKinney bet, it's Terrance McKinney round 1. So give me Terrance McKinney round 1 knockout. I doubt I'm going to end up with any bet on this fight. Here we go to light heavyweight as we see a former middleweight champion move up here in Robert the Reaper Whittaker taking on Nikita Krylov. I'll start with Krylov here. Dangerous finisher, been around at 205 forever. Was out for a good while after the submission win over Ryan Spann, took a couple years off, came back, had a couple rough first round knockout losses, but then got a good bounce back win over Modestas Bukauskas his last time out. I mean, the guy's a finisher. The guy, we just talked about Terrance McKinney being the ultimate killer, be killed. Nikita Krylov, a bit less than that. We've seen him go to decisions a couple times. Guys like Volkan Oezdemir, Magomed Ankalaev went to decision with him. But the guy is definitely, more often than not, he's finishing or he's getting finished. Doesn't have the greatest chin. He will just slide in, try to use his physicality. Pretty dangerous submission game himself, and was reckless enough to get submitted against Paul Craig. I remember cashing on Paul Craig submission at like plus 350 or something in that fight. That was awesome. But yeah, Krylov, fun fighter, definitely not the most technically sound, but pretty big, physical, and powerful guy. Whittaker on the other side, been a very technical striker, was a champion at 185 a while ago. Used his technical striking to stay at the top of the division for a long time. Anybody that tried to have a technical kickboxing match with him outside of Israel Adesanya, for the most part, was absolutely out of their realm. His signature 1-2 high kick. And he has pretty solid wrestling, too. He'd mix that in from time to time. Did it a good bit in the Israel Adesanya rematch, although it didn't look great in his last couple fights, or generally when he fights someone bigger than him, he can't wrestle, because you look back at the Drake Duplessis fight, out physicaled, TKO'd, also cashed on that one. Reminisced about the Paul Craig submission. One of my favorite bets of all time was Drake Duplessis inside the distance only against Robert Whittaker, like plus 350 or something. That was a fantastic cash, and that was a similar read to what I'm gonna give on this fight. I'll get into that in a second. But then obviously out physicaled by Khamzat Chimaev. And in the last fight against Reiner Dritter, it was a really close fight, but the reason he lost was the moments like in round 2 where Dritter just overwhelmed him with the size and the pressure, walking forward with the knees, getting on top of him, and being very hard to get off with that size. So my pick for this fight, if you haven't figured it out by now, or if you don't follow me on social media because I posted a while ago, is Nikita Krylov. I don't like the move up to 205 for Whittaker. I'll just be honest. I think he struggled with bigger guys at 185, so moving up to a division full of bigger guys did not feel like a smart move to me. Always liked picking the physical fighters against him, like Dreeks, Duplessis. So when early in the week Krylov dropped near pick'em or opened near pick'em, and then Robert Whittaker got bet to minus 210 or something, I took 2 units on Nikita Krylov at plus 185. This is why I tell you guys you should follow me on socials. I post my plays there when I make them. Because now the line has moved closer to plus 120. So quite a drastic shift. The market obviously agreed with my read that Krylov is a bad matchup for Robert Whittaker. So I took him for 2 units there. That was going to be the underdog best bet of the week before the movement. But now it feels kind of cheap giving it out. But I do have a special play for you on this one because I think it's going to be my prop play of the week. I took another unit now that props came out today on Krylov by TKO at plus 375. I think the size difference, I mean, Whittaker's been in so many wars, taken so many damage, so much damage. We've seen him finished in the Duplessis fight, almost finished in the DeRitter fight. And we've seen how dangerous Nikita Krylov is. I think that's a decently high percentage outcome that we're getting at a pretty big number. So I was happy to take that. I'm pretty sure that's going to be the prop play of the week, Nikita Krylov by TKO KO. But my bigger spot for the fight is his money line, 2 units at plus 185. One final time, I'm going to endorse my social medias at Doug Las Vegas Bets on Instagram and Twitter. Make sure you follow so you get my plays when I put them in, so you get ahead of line movement like that. I'm going to try and break my record for shortest fight breakdown on this one because I have no interest in this matchup, and I can't really be alone in that. I mean, Gable Steveson, huge heavyweight prospect, national champion wrestler at Minnesota, heavyweight gold medalist for the USA. Guy is a physical specimen, comes into the UFC at 3-0, getting mentored by John Jones out of Greg Jackson's gym. Looks to be all the goods, you know. Very, very hated. If you want to know why, just Google Gable Steveson loophole. You'll figure it out pretty quickly. He's facing Elisha Ellison. Ellison's had one UFC fight almost a year ago. He got knocked out in the first round by Brando Pericic, who I'm not particularly high on. Also has a sub loss in the regional scene. All his fights end pretty quickly, has a couple KOs. Gable Stevenson's the biggest favorite in UFC history right now, I believe, if he's not close to it. Yeah, it's pretty easy to see why. Gable Steveson should do whatever he wants to this guy. So Gable Steveson, I'm going to say generously in under a half a round by TKO, I'll say. Back to bantamweight, a couple of fast-handed boxers squaring off in this one. Former champion Cody Garbrandt, champion 10 years ago, taking on Adrian Yañez. Start with Garbrandt here. I mean, we can talk about how he was a former champion and reminisce and all that, but I think the more relevant information is what he's looked like lately. And in my notes here, I wrote one thing. Garbrandt doesn't throw punches anymore, and it makes me sad. I mean, he was never a particularly high volume guy, but oh my god, it's gotten really bad. Against Long Zhao in that third round, I mean, even after the foul, when he just like screamed and started headbutting, it was a really bad performance. I think Cody's looked bad for a while. Questionable cardio, questionable output, obviously questionable durability. He suffered, I think it was 4 straight knockout losses, with the 2 knockout losses to TJ Dillashaw, and then Pedro Munoz knocked him out as well. Cody's had some rough days. Obviously has the puncher's chance early because he does have lightning fast hands and pretty clean boxing. Dropped Long Zhao and Keone Barcelos early and won the first round against Davis and Figueiredo. So the guy's pretty dangerous for the first round. But if he doesn't get you out of there in the first round, you're probably going to overwhelm him. And I don't think that's going to be an issue for a guy like Adrian Yañez. Should have cashed me as dog of the week his last time out, and should have cashed me by decision at over plus 300. But the judges robbed him brutally against Ricky Simone when he dropped him right at the bell in the third round. I thought he won the first round quite clearly as well. I mean, even an argument for the second, I thought Ricky Simone did win the second, in my opinion. I thought it was 29-27 Adrian Yañez. Should have been the correct score, but is what it is. I can cry about it all day. Overall, he had a lot of hype going into that Rob Font fight back in the day. I hate to keep bringing up old bets. Last time, I swear, but I bet Rob Font in that one. I need to keep bragging, just for my ego, guys. It's just indulge. But yeah, since then it's kind of been a struggle. He's been 1-3-1. We'll call it 2-3. We'll give him the Ricky Simone win because we can do that. With a couple TKO losses, Font obviously just kind of took him to school, was a step ahead with the counter striking. Jonathan Martinez exposed pretty bad weakness with the leg kicks. He got his good bounce back win with Vinicius Salvador and then lost a decision to Daniel Marcos after that as well. So for this fight, I mean, Yañez has had his struggles as well as Garbrandt. He hasn't done as well on paper. I mean, Garbrandt's 3-2 in his last 5 compared to Yañez being 1-3-1. But I think he's just clearly still a step ahead. I think if they stand in there and box, Yañez is the younger guy who's taken much less damage. He's much more durable. At this point, I don't know how long Cody's speed is going to last. So yeah, I think Adrian Yañez justified as the huge favorite. Him by TKO at around -110. I don't know. I thought about it. Cody's kind of good at not getting knocked out anymore. He just circles on the outside. It seems content to lose decisions. So I think a decision's possible. Yañez probably going to be a piece in the parlay of the week this week if I give one out. I'll pick him to get a knockout. I think eventually he'll touch Cody because he's fast and super aggressive. So give me Adrian Yañez by second round KO here. Interesting one here is prospect in Luke Riley gets another step up in competition in the now back in the UFC for his second stint. Kai Kamaka. We'll start with Luke Riley. Very clean technical striker. Likes a high pace, getting into these fun brawls. Clearly a hole in his grappling. Bogdangrad was able to take him down and dominate him for the first round of his debut. Came back to get the knockout in that one. A nice highlight left hook. And then in his second fight, had a good 3-round battle where he just was a little faster, a little sharper, landed the cleaner shots on Michael Aswell Jr. and got the decision win here. So he's still undefeated. I'm not overly high on Riley. I do think he's a nice striker, but I think that grappling is going to rear its ugly head. That look against Bogdangrad was pretty bad. And we saw Michael Aswell lose to Gaston Bolaños in a competitive striking match as well. So that win, didn't age very well. So I have trouble picking him as a big favorite like this against Kai Kamaka here. Kai Kamaka, he's solid. Like I said, he's on his second UFC run. Was in there around the Fight Island era the first time. He gets hit cleanly a fair bit, which is concerning. He mixes his game up pretty well. I don't think he's the fastest striker or the most athletic guy, but what he does well. He's got pretty good technique, good with the low kicks and decent with the hands, and he mixes in the grappling a fair bit. Overall, for my pick in this one, I'm gonna lean very slightly towards Riley by decision, but man, with these odds, it's kind of tempting for me to take Kamaka by decision here. Just I have a hard time seeing him finish Riley, but I do think he has a clear path with the control on the ground. Just stay safe enough on the feet, mix in the takedowns, make it a close 29-28 either way. I hesitate on it though because he does, I think, get hit cleanly a lot. I think Riley's gonna have the bigger moments. I think he's definitely gonna win the minutes on the feet. And if Kamaka can't have grappling success, then he's screwed. So there's definitely reason to see why Luke Riley's the favorite, but I can easily see a path to victory for Kai Kamaka here that makes it tempting to pick him on that side. I'll go with Luke Riley by decision in this one, a 29-28 split to cover my ass. It'll be a 29. Yeah, this is my official prediction. 29-28 split decision, Luke Riley, and everyone in the end thinks it was a robbery. There you have it. You heard it here first. Next up, we'll go to flyweight for a fun matchup between Tracy Cortez and, forgive me if I butcher this, I know they say it on broadcasts like Wang Tong, but it's written Wang Kong. I'm bad at pronunciation. I'm going to call her Wang. Sorry. Anyways, we'll start with Tracy Cortez. She's a solid veteran. She's competed with girls like Jasmine Jasudavicius, former champ, Rose Namajunas, and coming off that tough submission loss to Erin Blanchfield. A solid wrestler, pretty solid boxing. I think a lot of people think of her as a grappler, but you look at that Jasudavicius fight, and she showed pretty clean boxing in that. So I was impressed. I think she's a bit more well-rounded than she gets credit for. Still has lost 2 of her last 3, getting outstruck by Namajunas and out-grappled by Blanchfield. So not necessarily cream of the crop of the division now at 32 years old. Probably hit the ceiling of what she's going to do. On the other side, Wang, she is a kickboxer. She came into the UFC and they kind of put the rocket ship on her back immediately because of that kickboxing win she has over champion Valentina Shevchenko. She got held up a little bit with a knockout loss in, was it it was submission. Sorry, she got knocked out into the submission. But yeah, I mean, this is a good technical kickboxer. I think her grappling, it's seen as a hole or a weakness. I think she's got really good balance, really good base. She's looked really hard to take down, just really physically solid, and clearly has a different kind of power in her hands than like the rest of the division. When she hits people, she's putting people to sleep or having a real impact, making Bruna Brazil back off the entire fight, essentially. She didn't want to get hit by her. So with that, I'm going to pick Wang here. I think Cortez could have some grappling success, but I don't think she's going to land the takedowns. I think it's just going to be too hard. I think Cong's going to defend them, stay on the feet. And where Cortez is boxing, like I said, it's probably a little better than people give credit for. I don't think it's anywhere near the level of Wang, though. I think she's going to land the harder, more impactful shots and get a decision win here. Here, a huge age gap in this matchup of hard-hitting strikers as Damian Pinas takes on Cesar Almeida. Start with Pinas coming off his UFC debut where he made easy work of West Party Time Schultz, showing off that power and physicality that, you can just see it. He looks the part, just 24 years old. The power is evident when you watch his fights, when he touches people. Very athletic, very explosive. Some questions about his ground game. We've seen him put in bad spots before on the regional scene, but so far hasn't fought really anyone that's been able to take advantage of that, was able to get back up and get the TKO finish there. And obviously at just 24 years old, he's still improving massively. Cesar Almeida on the other side, he is 38, a kickboxer, came over into MMA with some decent hype. Got the win right away against Dylan Budka in kind of a weird, boring fight where Budka just pushed him against the cage and then gassed and got knocked out. Since then, he's had some less than stellar performances. Lost to Roman Kopylov, clearly where he was getting taken down and hurt in that one. Ihor Potieria, I took him to decision. Potieria, not very high level. Abdul Razak Alhassan, he did get the knockout win, but looked like he was on his way to getting knocked out in that one. Caught him with a perfect counter, but he was in trouble in that one before Alhassan got over aggressive. And then he lost his last one to Cezary Olajaychuk, Lord McCall's brother. So not the best UFC run. Is 3-2 in that 5, but I haven't been overly impressed with him. He has a very limited game, just a kickboxer, decent power, but pretty slow at 38 years old. And with that, I think you get where I'm going with my pick in this one. I get why Pinas is the favorite. I think it's a good matchup for him. He's just so much younger. He can match the power. He's longer, and he doesn't have to worry about the grappling like in fights against Wes Schultz. So that weakness that we have seen exploited in the past against him, or not successfully, but we've seen on film, it's not really there for Almeida. We've seen he's definitely not going to shoot a takedown. So I think it's a good matchup for Pinas. He's got the huge age advantage, power, length, already went over all that. So I expect him to get a first round knockout in this one. This one's a weird one at middleweight. We got Ryan Gandra taking on Zach Reese in a matchup of 30-plus-year-olds who somehow don't have much experience. I mean, Zach Reese kind of has experience now. He's got 7 UFC fights, 13 MMA fights. But still, it feels like so many of those were just him getting the prospect treatment. He just hasn't really been pushed. He hasn't looked comfortable in the deep waters yet at all. Still just doesn't feel like a seasoned fighter. And then Ryan Gander is just coming off his debut at 31, completely untested still. I mean, just look at the striking numbers. It'll tell you how tested he is. Yeah, I got the quick win over Jose Medina. Showed off that power on the regional scene translated. I've kind of got a tough time getting a read on Gandra. We haven't seen him tested at all outside of his loss, where he took a knockout loss on the regional scene. He's gotten a bunch of finishes over less than stellar competition. So, when I look at Zach Reese, I think this guy is bigger, longer, has more experience. Both of these guys have the finishing power, so maybe the overall potential upside, you could say Gondra has a higher ceiling because we've seen Reese lose. But if you're giving me Reese as an underdog in this spot, I'm gonna pick Reese here. I think this is a matchup where both guys are very dangerous. Reese has a good submission game. He's gone the 3 rounds with UFC caliber competition, and he can get the early knockout too. So I think this is a fight that can go a lot of different ways. High variance fight. So I'm going to take the underdog in Zach Reese. I'm going to take him to get a first round submission in this one because we have seen he's pretty quick to grab those on the ground. And we haven't seen much of a ground game against anyone competent from Gandra. So give me Zach Reese here by first round submission. All right, last fight I'm going to go over for this card. Alessandro Costa stepping in on short notice to take on Cody custom-made Durden. We'll start with Alessandro Costa. He's 3-2 in his last 5. Been on a pretty good run in the UFC. I mean, he came in, had that short notice loss to Amir Albazi, turned around, got the win over Jimmy Flick. Close fight with Steve Erceg before Steve Erceg went on to fight for a title, and since then looked pretty good. I mean, outside of the weird performance against Alden Correa in his last 4 fights, had a really good performance against Kevin Borjas, who now, according to the AI rankings, is a top 10 fighter somehow. And then we mentioned the Correa performance, but got a nice finish with the liver shot over Stuart Nickel, and is coming off a first-round TKO win over Matt Schnell. So, everybody TKOs Matt Schnell, but he got the job done, got it done in the first round, putting together a couple nice performances, getting these wins, and now stepping in on short notice for the guy who I feel like steps in on short notice for everybody, Cody Durden. He's coming off that short notice win over Jafel Filo that broke his tough losing skid, although he has been matched up brutally. He fought Josh Van, then Jose Ochoa, then fights Alan Nascimento, and I think the only performance he had that really concerned me and made me understand why he was such a big underdog against Filo was the Tumen Demberall performance. I feel like a good version of Cody Durden gets the wrestling going in that one and gets the job done there. I don't think Tumen Demberall is the most impressive fighter. But yeah, we've seen Durden. I mean, the guy's been a good minute winner throughout the career, always been a strong wrestler, dominated Charles Johnson on the ground, and he's been pretty good on the feet. Keeps a good high pace, was particularly looked really good. It's funny I say this, but in the Bruno Silva fight where he ended up getting knocked out, I thought it was a career best that he looked on the feet. Just outstanding pace in that one. That being said, I'm going to take Alessandro Costa on this one. I just trust his durability and finishing ability a lot more. I think he's more powerful, more durable, has a better offensive submission game. I think it's going to be tough for Durden to get his wrestling going here. Costa is able to keep a high pace. He can work the leg kicks. So I'm going to pick Alessandro Costa. I'm going to pick him to get a finish in this one. I'll say gets it done in the second round. Don't really have a clear method in mind. I'll say he gets a submission. I don't think he's got one in the UFC yet, but he's shown a pretty good submission game outside the UFC. So give me Alessandro Costa to get his first UFC submission here. All right, well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you're as excited for the return of the Mac as I am. The Mac is back this weekend. Hopefully, all goes well for him, even though I don't think it will. Lots of great, very competitive fights on this card. So far, the only spots that I've put out are Brandon Royval and Nikita Krylov, and Krylov by KO. But I'm eyeing up a few other ones like Mario Bautista, Zach Reese. So make sure you go Follow me on the socials at Stug Las Vegas Bets on both Instagram and Twitter. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. It helps me out a lot. I'm trying to grow things. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and drop a comment telling me your favorite pick from this card, your most confident pick, any fight, any big favorite, any underdog. Go as bold as you like. Just tell me your favorite pick from the card down in the comments. One final time, I really hope you enjoy the fights this weekend, and I will see you next week.